Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. We have an exciting topic today. Today we'll be going through a bit of an introduction on how you can take SAP Cloud ALM and connect it with your Application Lifecycle Management tool, whatever you happen to be using. Could be that you're using these tools to manage your projects. Could be you're using these tools, these ALM tools, to manage your operations, ongoing, change management. And the tools that I'm talking about are Jira, Azure DevOps, and ServiceNow primarily. Those are the tools that we have some integrations for. So what we're going to be talking about today is how you can take advantage of the latest, greatest capabilities of the SAP ALM platform and get the benefit of those tools that you already use today and create a kind of a uniform platform where you can have that, consistent approach for all of your projects. I'll get into a little bit more detail about what that looks like. At this point, I will give you a quick introduction on who we are in case you are new to CoreALM. So CoreALM has been in business for about 15 years. The company was started at that time when our CEO and founder left his position at SAP. Most of our team has history working at SAP in the ALM space. We've got quite extensive experience. Labanat founded CoreALM because at the time when he surveyed the landscape, there was really no provider that was out there that was focused on application lifecycle management, specifically for SAP customers. And at SAP, he had a lot of customers that had needs that couldn't easily be serviced, and so decided to found CoreALM to do just that, and was able to sort of get going right away, serving customers. It was about 2018 when we realized we know that SAP, for those people that run SAP, it's generally a very core central application as part of their landscape. But of course, they have other applications that they support and maintain, as well as custom developments that they do. And for those other applications and custom work that they do, they have value streams that they manage. And oftentimes, those value streams or change management processes are orchestrated through different tools outside of the SAP ALM tools, which, at the time we started, it was just Solution Manager. Now, Solution Manager is coming to end of life, and everybody is considering a migration to SAP Cloud ALM. But if you're using Jira, Azure DevOps, ServiceNow, you're probably trying to figure out there's a lot of overlap between those tools and the SAP Cloud ALM offering. How does that work? And we'll be addressing some of that today. So it's about 2018 when we realized the opportunity to kind of build those integrations between the core SAP ALM tools and those enterprise tools that people are using. And really, that was the launch. We've done integrations with Solution Manager for Charm, Focus Build for many years. We have customers running on those platforms, very satisfying results. But now they're considering, okay, well, it's Solution Manager coming to end of life. Maybe I need to consider a migration to Cloud ALM. So we've served some of SAP's largest customers. We cover all industries. We have representation across, complex, challenging industries such as pharma or Ministry of Defense, where you have regulated processes that need to be validated. So we have experience with that. All of our products are certified for those environments with our customers. We also have very large financial institutions that are using our products, and we've passed security checks with all of them as well. Many of these customers keep coming back to us for services, but continue to run our products. From a product and services perspective, we cover all aspects of the lifecycle management process. So whether you're just getting started on an SAP implementation, whether you're in the middle of one right now and you're looking at, trying to figure out your test strategy or your release management strategy, or even monitoring for ongoing operations, we cover all aspects of that. And we have, capabilities and integrations with many different tools. Obviously, we mentioned SAP Cloud ALM, Solution Manager, but we also have, experience with Signavio, Tricentis, many of the Tricentis products such as Live Compare or Tosca. So we'll be touching on some of those things, but certainly broad capability for all of those things today. On top of that, what I think is important to understand is that many people that are using Solution Manager or Cloud ALM today, they also have teams that are running in those other applications. Maybe they have value stream teams using Jira or DevOps teams using Azure DevOps. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of requirements management, process management, bug fix, tests, and defect type capabilities that overlap quite a bit with those other platforms. ServiceNow more on the change management side generally, although they have extended capabilities there as well. And so what happens often is that we see that teams who are trying to adopt the SAP solution, they end up in silos where you have SAP teams doing things in one particular way, and then you have non-SAP teams doing things a little bit differently. And what we'd like to suggest as possible is to bring those teams together using a unified process, or at least integrate their efforts so they have visibility to what's happening. We have the ability to do things both ways. Both ways meaning that you can just simply integrate and share information, or you can create one unified process. And some of our customers lately are really taking advantage of moving everybody to a standardized process where there's additional capabilities for those SAP people built into the tools that they're already using today, whether it's Jira, Azure DevOps, or ServiceNow. What that does is it limits the decentralized access, so you don't have people switching back and forth between two different applications fundamentally to do the same thing. Of course, if you are using two different tools, then there's a chance you're going to be out of sync with the information in those two tools. And so we prevent that no data inconsistencies. There's no duplication of effort to capture information across the platforms. And there, generally, if you aren't connected, then you have a lack of ability to automate that process. Everybody's trying to get to a place where, you click the button and all of the, follow-on change management processes are automated. And that's very difficult to do if you're using different tools that are not connected. So that's what our connectors are designed to do. We have Solution Manager connectors from the past. We have Cloud ALM connectors, which is kind of the go forward. For those people that are looking at transport management capabilities and you want to work directly in those tools, let's say ServiceNow, to manage your transports directly from ServiceNow without Cloud ALM and without Solution Manager, we also have a solution for that is I think a really innovative. We're the only ones that are actually build SAP transport management controls directly into Jira, Azure DevOps, and ServiceNow. So that's another opportunity that you can take advantage of. Okay, just a quick slide to summarize what we discussed. Solution Manager connectors exist, as well as Cloud ALM and direct transport management controls. You can see it covers implementations, operations across the board. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the introduction. What we're going to be talking about today, and I'm excited, I'll introduce my my guest for today, Baldwin Spihiai, who's a Cloud ALM expert and an ALM architect overall for SAP. Used to work at SAP, but I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. But what are the benefits of this? Just to summarize what I mentioned before. So really what we're trying to get to, if possible, is a unified process where you can have across your entire enterprise for any ongoing development project, you can follow one set process and decide which is your leading tool. Is it Jira? Is it Azure DevOps? Are you going to use Cloud ALM and then extend it? Those are different options that you have. We recommend that you have a vision of what your roadmap is going to be for which is going to be that enterprise leading tool, but you don't have to get there all at once. What we definitely recommend is to prove as you go, proof of value. And for that, we do offer free trials for anybody that wants to test this out. Two options: you can test it out in our environment, which gives you quick access. You don't have to, do anything on your side from an infrastructure standpoint. We can get you set up right away. The other option is to do a proof of concept in your environment, and both are possible. Just so you know, there is we do have a publication on LinkedIn. It's also on our website in our blogs area, so you can go to CoreALM.com in the blogs section, which is in our top menu. You should be able to access any topics that we're posting about. This is a weekly newsletter. I'm going to put the link in the chat to one of our recent editions, because it's very relevant for this subject. It talks about the migration from Solution Manager. So a lot of people that are using Cloud ALM, maybe they're testing the waters right now, but they eventually want to migrate from Solution Manager to Cloud ALM. And so we have a pretty in-depth article that gives you a good overview of all the steps that are needed. This will give you actionable insights you can get started on right away, and think about how you're going to structure your move to Cloud ALM. If you're already there, you probably know that there's maybe some limitations in what Cloud ALM offers. We have strategies that can help you to avoid those, but certainly you're going to want to take advantage of the SAP platform, the special capabilities, because if you're using Jira, Azure DevOps, or ServiceNow, it doesn't have the ability to manage SAP transports directly. So if you want to do transport management, if you want to do testing, it could be either manual testing or even automated testing, potentially with Tosca Cloud. That's an area where, of course, SAP Cloud ALM excels. And then also, if you want to do process modeling or process design work, either in Cloud ALM or in Signavio, but then synchronized, you can have a synchronization between Signavio and Cloud ALM. These are things that Cloud ALM offers that may not be fully built in those additional tools. And then, of course, SAP Cloud ALM has the best practices content, which help you to deliver the test cases and process designs that are industry standard that are going to accelerate your implementation projects. So that's an overview, a taste of what you're about to hear today. With that, I'm going to introduce Valdrin Spihai. Valdrin, welcome.
Thank you, Steve, for having me.
Okay, I'm just going to turn on your presentation controls here, so feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. And again, as Steve mentioned, my name is Valdrin Spihai, one of the ALM architects here at CoreALM. And in today's agenda, it's going to be an extensive presentation where we're going to go through SAP Cloud ALM introduction. So if you're unfamiliar with Cloud ALM or just briefly been exposed to it, we're going to go through the implementation phases and including the requirements to deploy process from starting the project to all the way deploying a process into a, let's say, productive environment. And then also the goal is to also do an introduction to the CoreALM connector for the integration between Jira and Azure DevOps and also ServiceNow as well. So within this fourth bullet point, we'll primarily introduce you to Jira and Azure DevOps and how that integrates with Cloud ALM, for example, for either as a leading tool, or for example, if you have some type of requirements for non-SAP that you are planning or are using currently to manage those in those third-party tools. And then last but not least, we'll also go through the integration demos where we'll create some items in either Jira, Azure DevOps, and Cloud ALM and show you how that integration works. At the end or just during the session, feel free to capture any questions that you may have, either put them in chat or just we can open the call at the end for those questions and answers. The call is muted throughout this presentation, so therefore we just list those up in chat and I'll be more than happy to answer them at the end of the session. So from a overview in Cloud ALM, so this is a ALM application, or let's say the new ALM application from SAP Solution Manager, if you are familiar with it. And there's really a couple of items in here that we like to explain. And one of them is around the implementation side. So for example, if you have any type of implementation projects, this is where Cloud ALM comes into the picture. If it's either completely cloud, or if you have some type of hybrid applications where you have on-prem and cloud as well, it's going to help you with anywhere from design all the way to deploy, or that entire process from requirements to deploy. um, as far as, for example, capture any type of processes, including requirements and etc. And then how do you build them, including some transport integration and testing those items and also deploying them. But also on the other hand, as if you are, for example, live or you tend to monitor any of the applications, you can also utilize Cloud ALM from a operations perspective, where you can monitor different applications, analyze them, and also raise any type of alerts, for example, depending on your monitoring scenarios that you currently have. However, in today's presentation, we're primarily going to focus on the SAP Cloud ALM for implementation perspective, and how can that help you, for example. So on the implementation perspective, it's primarily focused on a cloud-centric and hybrid solution. So for example, any type of applications that you currently have, any type of S4 on-prem that you're configuring, or if you have any type of, let's say, BTP or cloud applications. For both of those applications, Cloud ALM is kind of like the go-to application lifecycle management tool for you to help you within your implementations. And also, in addition to that, it does offer, pre-configured items for you to jumpstart. So, for example, it does follow the SAP Activate methodology, where it has a ton of content and tools for you to jumpstart that implementation, including your fit to standard workshops. In addition to that, given the fact that this is a cloud application, you'll be able to start onboarding your team and start using some of the pre-configured processes pretty much, as soon as that you have the tenant from SAP. So there's really no configuration and etc. required. There may be some settings and etc. However, in regards to enabling items and configuring, you don't necessarily require any of that. So from an onboarding perspective, most of it's pre-configured for you to be able to start a project directly within Cloud ALM. Now, and how does Cloud ALM really support your end-to-end project lifecycle, including how does it map to the SAP Activate methodology? In the top section in here, you primarily see the SAP Activate methodology, where we're usually, regardless of type of ALM tool that we're using or no tool at all, we usually go through these type of phases to implement an SAP project, which is we kind of primarily start from a discovery, and then we go through the fit to standard analysis and also the scope project and configuring, and then the rest of the processes from primarily testing and then going into deploying operations. The way Cloud ALM fits into this Activate methodology, so you primarily, once you onboard the team into Cloud ALM, it will offer you some out-of-the-box processes, for example, or best practices in order for you to be able to run those fit-to-standard workshops, and also start from accelerators rather than for you to build something from scratch. And then depending on those fit-to-standard workshops and the outcome, at that point, you're able to get into your build process or start to configure and develop the environment based on those requirements, let's say, that you've captured directly within Cloud ALM. So it does offer different task types in order for you, and that's what we're mainly gonna talk about today, where you can pretty much capture and track different statuses during your design and your build process. Well, then in addition to that, it also has a test orchestration tool where you can do test planning and test execution, including defect management directly within Cloud ALM. And last but not least, it has some functionality where, for example, you can orchestrate the deployment of your SAP changes into, let's say, into your next environment, such as your QA, pre-prod, or your production as well. Last but not least, we talked about in the initial slide, where from an operations perspective, once you go live, then the goal is to really start utilizing the monitoring tools that Cloud ALM offers in order for you to be able to monitor the environment and make sure it's always up and running and you don't have any type of issues. Now, from a end-to-end project lifecycle, and to continue on this, within Cloud ALM, primarily you'll start to utilize the best practices. So, for example, you'll have different types of accelerators, such as process flows. You'll also get some best practices documentation. including test cases, for example, that are standard test cases for those processes. So, for example, if a process does not necessarily change, you don't even have to create any test cases. And all of this information is directly within Cloud ALM. It's a matter for you to be able to consume it by enabling those processes and then starting to review. And then as far as the build phase goes, this is where, for example, you're able to create requirements and user stories and also features to manage your development and configuration directly in Cloud ALM, and by tying it together with your design phase, therefore you can configure the system and track it. And then also from a testing perspective, as I mentioned, you'll have these different accelerators in place for you to be able to jumpstart the testing. Let's say, for example, if your test case is slightly changed from the best practices, you can update rather than create them from scratch, for example, so that you can do manual testing. But in addition to that, I'll talk a little bit more in the other slides, but it does also offer automated testing as well that's integrated within Cloud ALM. And last but not least, the deploy phase, which is very important, for example, where it's going to offer different types of deployment strategies for you to be able to control all of your changes, in what environment do they go and at what point in time. It also offers different deployment apps for you to be able to mass import changes into your, let's say, your testing or your productive environment as well. Last but not least, as far as anything that you actually capture within Cloud ALM, all of that information will be, you'll be able to report on it, and it will be traceable, and you'll build an entire traceability for the entire process from requirement all the way to deploy. Now, from a implementation capabilities, and this to go a step deeper, for example, on the process management side, this is where, for example, on the input, you'll have fit to stand-up workshops, you'll have process scoping and viewer, you have process authoring, where, for example, you can create different process diagrams and modify them. And then you also have your requirements collection, where you can capture the requirements directly within a Cloud ALM. And then from that perspective, for example, the output is that you'll have some type of documentation related to all of those items that you captured during the workshop. And this is where you can also have either an integration to, like, let's say, a SharePoint or an SAP documentation repository, where you can integrate it directly within Cloud ALM and manage that documentation within Cloud ALM, the statuses and etc., and version and history as well. In addition to that, from a project management and task management, we have different types of views. For example, we can assign these different tasks and project management tasks to different users, and also as well be able to track those tasks if a user completes them or not. And you'll have different Gantt charts, for example, and also tracking project reports, where you can track all of the tasks as users are completing those items from an update perspective. And then from a test orchestration, you'll see that you'll have test plan and test preparation, and also test case creation, manual or automated. So you can pretty much organize the different types of testing cycles directly within Cloud ALM. And you can also have both manual and automated within those same test plans, depending where you are with your automation process. And then the integration, as far as the test execution goes, as you are executing those test cases, you'll have different types of defect management that you can create directly in Cloud ALM. I'll also manage those defects within the tool. Change enablement. So again, any type of transports and any types of changes that you have during the project, for example, you'll be able to generate different features for the project, and also be able to control those and deploy those features into your next environment using Cloud ALM features. Now, starting from a design phase, and how would you conduct the fit to standard workshop within Cloud ALM. So one of the areas that once you go into Cloud ALM, it's going to be around the process management, where, for example, you'll be able to consume the best practices directly in here. And then at that point, once you consume the best practices, you'll have different types of process flows that you could automatically start your Explore workshops. In this case, if, for example, if you are able to consume something that's defined by SAP or that's standard by SAP, at that point you don't need to make any changes. However, let's take, for example, if you do need to make any types of changes to the process flows, you also can automatically change these in Cloud ALM, for example, and then at that point you can also start to capture any type of documentation. In this case, directly within process flows, regardless if it's standard, for example, or if you need to add, let's say, an additional process within Cloud ALM. At that point, you can automatically start to generate a requirement from a process flow. So this is building that integration between your workshops and also the requirements management within Cloud ALM. And this is something that you would do, for example, through your Explore workshops. And in addition to that, for the requirements, you'll have a approval workflow that, therefore, for example, you can go and approve a requirement after it's created. Now, in addition to that, after the requirements are created, you'll have also the task management, depending which task management type you use. For example, you could also have a user story or a project task that you can utilize within Cloud ALM. At that point, you can start to generate different tasks, such as project tasks or user stories, in order for you to make sure that that specific requirement that you created as part of your workshop is delivered. So this, for example, this is a view where you could generate that specific project task for you to start, for example, managing the team and make sure that those requirements are also delivered per requirements. Now, and this is a different view for example, for each one of the requirements, that you could have multiple items or integrated items within that requirement, such as project tasks, to manage, let's say, parent-child relationship, and all of the tasks are delivered for that requirement, including, for example, towards the bottom in here, if you have any type of features where you have to make an SAP change or configure something in the system, all of those will roll up and be integrated directly within the requirement. So this will link the tasks to requirements, including test cases and any type of transport information as well, directly to the requirement as well. So also, we talked a little bit about managing, for example, transports with Cloud ALM. This is where the feature comes into into the picture, and the feature will consist of transport information, where, for example, you're able to create a transport within this feature, and you also can manage it with workflows and also transport it to the next environment whenever that's required. So you could bundle multiple transports and features, multiple transports within a feature, for example, and also this will, you can relate it to different items such as a requirement, user story, project task, and etc. So therefore, this is starting to build your traceability from the requirement all the way to deploying this feature into the next environment. Now, within the feature, you also have a certain workflow, but it does have some change management workflow to it, for example. So not everyone can, let's say, deploy a feature into a productive environment without being approved. It has some workflows, for example, such as in implementation, at that point when we are, let's say, in a development environment and we're creating a change or a transport. And then as you go through in your QA environment, you might have something like in testing, successfully tested or ready for production, depending where you are with your testing. But in addition to that, you'll also have some transport of copies capabilities where you can import that feature or the transport of copies into the next environment without actually releasing the transport. And then last but not least, you'll have an approval between ready for deployment and deployed, for example, and when we go into a productive environment or when we're trying to deploy as a cutover, at that point, only features that are approved for production can go into that productive environment. So you'll have full control of any changes that are intended to go into the next environment by having specific roles assigned to only users that are responsible for or have the approval privileges for them to import those changes in the next environment. Now, as far as the analytics goes, so at any given time, any type of information that we log within Cloud ALM, so for example, you could monitor your entire project by different phases, such as prepare, explore, realize, but also within each one of the phases, primarily within build, you can have different types of sprints, for example, within the specific timelines where you could associate all of your tasks, including your requirements, so therefore you know exactly if you are on time with your project. Now, to talk a bit more about the test management overview, this is where within testing, it does support both cloud and on-premise, also SAP and non-SAP. So if you have any type of non-SAP test executions, the tool does not limit you from creating those manual test cases in here as well, or including automated but Tricentis. So it does offer a test orchestration, and what we mean by that is that, for example, you can have different types of testing, including manual and automated. You can also create test plans, for example, where for each one of the cycles or within a cycle, you could create multiple test plans for teams where you can manage all of the testing that needs to be executed. And again, it does have a native integration with test automation tool for S/4HANA Cloud and also Tricentis test automation for SAP Cloud ALM. It's a limited version for the test automation for SAP Cloud ALM and Tricentis. However, it does give you a jump start and how to start to automate those test cases within Tricentis. So it's a native integration, meaning that you could stand it up within minutes, and therefore you can start using the test automation from Tricentis directly integrated within Cloud ALM. Now, from a test management overview, and that's a couple of the other capabilities, for example, that it supports. So you could have multiple cycles and multiple rollouts, for example. So you could reuse the same or the test cases for different test plans, for example. So as long as the test case is there, you could associate it with multiple test plans. You have different test statuses, such as to manage the preparation, also the execution, and when that test plan is also completed. You'll have some features such as, for example, you can assign testers to each one of the test cases, so they know exactly what test case they need to execute. And then similar to other tools, for example, you'll have a time frame and you'll have statuses for each one of the test cases in the execution mode as well, which I'll go into the next slide in here. So from an execution perspective, it's pretty user-friendly, where, for example, you open a test case, you'll see the steps with all of the instructions that they expect to result, and then you'll also have a drop-down status if it failed, if it passed, or if you need to create any type of defects. Which on the defect area, it's very important because you'll have a direct integration of the defect, and in time when you create a defect, for example, it's either integrated with the test step as well. And then from a traceability perspective, if you do follow, for example, most of the items that we explained throughout these slides, such as using the solution processes, including capturing requirements and either user stories or project tasks, or both, including documentation, and also if you use the test management within Cloud ALM, and that's where you'll get, for example, a full traceability map, let's say, from when the time where you decided to utilize one of the processes, including the requirements that you approved to move forward, and if all of the deliverables are delivered, including if they have been tested or not, for example, within this traceability map in here. So you'll get an entire drill down of the items that it took to either deliver a requirement or to deliver a process that you scoped in the initial project. Now, from a project status or just reports in general, you'll have multiple CAN dashboards that Cloud ALM offers by default. You could make some changes, for example, with this analytical view as to what you want to see within the dashboards, but you pretty much get any type of status, any type of data that's required, such as progress, task status, requirement, including traceability and trend analysis, and also any type of historical analysis as well on the project. So fairly easy to use, and you're able to modify any of the tiles and let's say even some of the different charts directly within Cloud ALM. Now to switch gears and talk a bit more about the integrations. So Cloud ALM does also offer a standard integration with Signavio. So if you're using Signavio today, you're able to pretty much push any type of diagrams that are within Signavio directly into Cloud ALM. Therefore, for example, if you decide to use this type of integration, the goal is that you would push this to Cloud ALM, and then from that point on, you will start your requirements capturing, etc. But the integration, it's native from SAP, so you could integrate these two tools together as long as you have Signavio and Cloud ALM instances within your organization. Right now, we're going to go into introduction to CoreALM connector for integration with Jira and Azure DevOps. And this is, for example, if you are using Cloud ALM or if you intend to use Cloud ALM in the future, but you also have Jira or Azure DevOps or ServiceNow, for example, and you want to have these tools integrated. Maybe you have a non-SAP team where, for example, they're using Jira or Azure DevOps, but now you have some type of SAP initiative and you would like to use some of the features from Cloud ALM, primarily, for example, features because you want to manage transport or maybe testing, for example. In this case, this is where we could help you with this integration from CoreALM. So just a brief overview, the integration between SAP Cloud ALM and Jira or Azure DevOps, it's a bi-directional integration. So for example, you could create items in Cloud ALM, or you could create items in the third-party tool and automatically have them flow within Cloud ALM. But in addition to that, you could map, for example, any type of issues or work items from Jira or Azure DevOps to any task types in Cloud ALM. So if you want to, for example, map, let's say, epics with the requirements within Cloud ALM, that would be an option, or any of these other items that are listed here, including any custom types as well. Also, you could map any type of statuses and fields, including, for example, create and change tasks in both tools, as I mentioned. So just a sample scenario, for example, what we see in most use cases, this is a integration between Cloud ALM and ADO. And a lot of times you'll have a Cloud ALM project where you have an SAP initiative, and then you also have some type of projects in ADO, let's say for some third-party tools that SAP integrates with. But however, you might have some type of CI/CD pipeline in ADO, for example, where that team that is non-SAP, they intend to use the the Azure DevOps application, and you want to have your team within SAP Cloud ALM. In this case, this is where, for example, you could automatically create any type of features directly from Cloud ALM into Azure DevOps, for example, and then also if there's any type of, let's say, a task that you need to create within Cloud ALM to deliver a specific requirement, it will automatically, let's say, create a user story within Azure DevOps. And then in addition to that, any type of defects that that you get created during the testing within Cloud ALM will automatically also generate a bug within Azure DevOps. Also, what's very important that if you make it dependent on the status mapping that you will do within our application, at that point, at any given time when you update any type of statuses either in Azure DevOps or Cloud ALM, it will automatically update it in the in the other tool. Now, also, for example, this is from a status mapping perspective. So there's some common statuses that are within Cloud ALM. Keep in mind these are predefined, so you cannot really change statuses in Cloud ALM. But if you have different statuses either in Jira or Azure DevOps, for example, we could pretty much map any status with our Cloud ALM connector. So meaning even, for example, if you want to have it completely bi-directional, where you want to create let's say a issue type in Jira or Azure DevOps, it will automatically create it within Cloud ALM, or vice versa, for example, as well. At any given time when you make any status updates, it will automatically also reflect within the other environment. So this is very important because once you do this, then you'll have pretty much traceability and reporting in both tools, and none of the tools will be out of sync. Now, from a field mapping as well, for example, in Cloud ALM, you'll have some predefined fields. You don't necessarily have the option to create any custom fields. However, within the Azure DevOps, this is where you could decide what are some of the fields that you want to map from one application to another. And this is something where we have a user-based mapping, for example, so you don't have to code anything within our application, and you could map any field to any field. So therefore, for example, if you create something in Cloud ALM, it will pass that information directly to ADO, or vice versa from ADO into SAP Cloud ALM. Now, from a Jira perspective, so we're going to switch gears into another application, for example. Now, you might have different issue types, but the integration pretty much works exactly the same. So you might have epics and user stories instead of features and other work item types from Azure DevOps. But this is, for example, the integration works exactly the same at any given time, depending on your mapping. Anything that you do create will automatically create it in either tool, and you'll also have complete status updates as well. So, and also from a field mapping perspective, so pretty much exactly the same. At any given time, if you create something in Jira, we'll also create it also in SAP Cloud ALM. Now, in the next section of this presentation, we're going to go into a demo. And then just to kind of give you an idea, we're going to start off, for example, from Cloud ALM. So first, we'll do a integration between Cloud ALM and Azure DevOps. And then the second portion of this will also go into Azure DevOps, depending on the time that we have left in the demo. So that way you can see the demonstration and how it works. Initially, so let me just give you an idea how the integration works. So we pretty much have a complete user interface in here that you could do. You could map all of your projects, for example. So let me just quickly find the project in here that's mapped. And then you'll be able to see all of the different types of mappings in here between the two tools. So pretty much, for example, you can map any Azure project to any Cloud ALM project as well. And then in here you can decide the type of mappings that you want to have between your requirements and other items as well. And then within our UI, our application, you can pretty much map any type of requirement statuses with any type of Cloud ALM status. So you don't necessarily have to write any type of code. You can decide which direction you want to have this Cloud ALM to create a requirement, let's say in Azure DevOps or vice versa. Once you do this configuration, that's from a configuration perspective, then at that point, you can pretty much start by, let's say creating a requirement within Cloud ALM or within Azure DevOps. So what we're going to do in the first one is we're going to go ahead and create a requirement directly in Cloud ALM. So an example, we'll just call this a third-party requirement in ADO. And then any of the information towards the bottom in here, for example, any type of, let's say if I assign this to myself, and if I do enter any type of start dates for the specific requirement, and then including tags and etc. As long as I save this, at that point, for example, it's automatically going to create also the scenario. What we also do is, for example, while that's being created, we'll also provide a link directly within Cloud ALM. So therefore, you actually know exactly what item is created from Cloud ALM. So the link is provided directly within this area in here. So for example, and then once you select it, it's automatically going to take you to that Azure DevOps items in here. Now, once it takes you in here, obviously any type of information that we provided for ADO, including any type of long description, who's it assigned to as well, all of that information is directly displayed. Now, there's also some integration items in here. You don't necessarily have to show these, but what's also important, we also provide the ID back into SAP Cloud ALM. So once you click on that, for example, it'll take you directly back into Cloud ALM. Now, depending on the type of status that you have between these two tools, for example, let's say once you switch it to active and you save it, this is automatically is going to also pass a status and change it within Cloud ALM. So therefore, Cloud ALM will always be up to date with the changes. So if I go back into Cloud ALM, now at that point, we should see, for example, that now the status has changed from from in refinement to from created to in refinement directly within Cloud ALM. In addition to that, what we also do as far as the application goes, so any of this information that you have in here, if you decide to use project tasks, feature test cases, all of that information can also be displayed directly within your Azure DevOps. So therefore, you can have all of that information within the tool, and you can see if you have any type of solution processes where this is created and etc. Also, for example, if you do create any project tasks or user stories, such as children, which in this case in here, for example, you can create any type of project tasks and it will link in parent-child, very similar to Azure DevOps, for example. It will automatically also create that parent-child relationship within ADO. And in addition to that, if you do decide to create any type of let's say user stories or tasks, as long as you have integrated these items within Cloud ALM and Azure DevOps, they will automatically get generated as well. Now, let me also show you another item, for example, where in here, I'm also going to go ahead and create one item directly within Azure DevOps. So let's say, for example, if you create a user story in here, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to send every user story from Azure DevOps into Cloud ALM. What you can enable something like this, where we have it in our test environment, like a Cloud ALM enabled. And then as long as you enable that feature there, it's automatically going to generate a issue from Azure DevOps into Cloud ALM. So we can just name something like this, and then once you save that, and then the integration will automatically create that. So what we'll do is we'll just click back on that story, and then we'll give it a minute, and then you'll see that it will automatically generate a task in here, for example. So once you go into that specific ID, it will create automatically let's say in this case, a user story from Azure DevOps into Cloud ALM. And then depending on the statuses, for example, that you decide to map in here, so if you set it to, let's say, in progress from Cloud ALM, it should also automatically update back into the Azure DevOps. Now, in the next section in here, what I want to go through is also give you a quick demonstration on the Jira side. So we'll change the tool slightly from Cloud ALM from Azure DevOps into Jira. So Jira is going to be very similar from a specific status mapping, we'll also have a complete user interface where you could do different mappings for different items in here as well. This is also a certified app, so if you also want to deploy this from Jira Marketplace, you could do that directly from there. Now, an example is here that we're going to go ahead and we'll just go ahead and create a issue type directly in Jira. So very similar to what we showed for Azure DevOps, for example. Let's say if you do have a user story map with a user story within Cloud ALM, you'll create a user story similar to not similar, but exactly what you currently do within your Jira instance. And then as long as you give it a summary, for example, then also within Jira side, we always offer a option in here to make sure that most of our customers that use Jira, they don't necessarily want to send every issue type to Cloud ALM. Therefore, you can have some type of toggle in here where as long as you enable it, yes, it's also going to create this within Cloud ALM as well. Also, any type of information such as if you map story points and etc., all of this information can automatically flow from Jira into Cloud ALM as well. Once you enter all of the information, then you click on Create. And then we go to that issue type. It will automatically create, for example, the task ID in here, and you'll see any type of information, for example, that gets automatically updated. Everything will be captured under the history and logs as it does today, anything that the integration does as far as that goes. Now, once you navigate to here, it's automatically going to take you back into Cloud ALM. And then the example is here. If you have any, let's say if Jira is your initiating tool and you want to pass a user story to a SAP responsible person. Therefore, as long as you create the user story from Jira, it will automatically flow into Cloud ALM. And then any type of information that you've added in there, such as start date, end date, for example, including any type of story points, priority, and etc. Even if I did assign this to someone, that information will flow directly into Cloud ALM. And also what's very important, at any given time, for example, if a user wants to also see the Jira reference story, for example, they can also navigate to that story back directly from here. And again, from a status mapping perspective, it's a matter of configuration and what you decide to map. But anything that you do decide to map in here, for example, will automatically flow back into Jira, including, in my case, if you have many more statuses within Jira than you do within Cloud ALM, you don't necessarily have to map every single one of them, for example. You could just map the ones that you think it should be updated from Cloud ALM or Jira.
Awesome. A ton of flexibility. We do have some questions here, Valjan, so maybe I'll just jump in now if you don't mind. And I'm going to prioritize these questions based on the order that they were asked, just to make sure we can cover everything in time. If we don't get to your question in today's discussion, we will reach out to you directly after the webinar. These webinars are recorded, so if you missed any part of it, then you can go back and watch the recording. The link to the recording will be sent to you directly. So if you have any questions, get them into the chat quickly as we're getting close to time. First question, Valjan. So this question is around connecting Jira to operations events within Service Desk. So I think the question is, can you integrate Jira, which you talked about a little bit, the monitoring capabilities with Cloud ALM alerts?
You can, yeah. So for example, if there's any type of alerts that you want to send to Jira or ServiceNow, yeah, absolutely. That's not something that we discussed in the session today because we primarily touched on implementation, but there's also a such integration that does exist.
Excellent. Okay, the next one is, this one's going back to kind of a solution manager. Solution manager can validate code, for instance, integrating with ATC, the ABAP code analyzer. Is this an option with SAP Cloud ALM?
Steve, can you repeat that question one more time?
So using a Solman to do validation of code was a capability of Solution Manager, and that was done through integrating with ATC. So I think that's the ABAP code analyzer. And the question is the test cockpit, ABAP test cockpit. I think the question is, can you have a similar integration for code analysis in Cloud ALM?
So Cloud ALM does not currently have any functionality to manage the code, or for example, what Solman has currently, which is the ATC checks embedded within Solman. So those functionalities do not exist in Cloud ALM today. Now, if you have something in S4, that's a question that we may have to take back, because I'm not sure if there's any such functionality where you could integrate Cloud ALM with S4 with those ATC checks. But the functionality to do ATC checks in Cloud ALM doesn't exist today.
Right, but I think there are hooks for workflows, steps that you can attach to custom workflow processes from Cloud ALM, which you could use as hooks, and then you can use some kind of an external code management or code analysis capability, but it wouldn't be built into Cloud ALM, correct?
There's workflow management that you can manage features and etc. Yes, but not sure about ATC checks at this point.
Right. Okay, got it. The next question was around looking for integration between Jira and Cloud ALM for bi-directional communication. I think you covered that. The answer is yes. Also, can this add on or help to achieve Jira as a unified tool for creating transports to the production import? So I'll let you answer that one, and then can we connect Cloud ALM with Jira release management and schedule? So I think the basic question here is, can it be a unified transport management tool? I think the answer is Cloud ALM has those capabilities. I think there's some limitations on the integration of the feature, which within Cloud ALM, it's the feature that where the transports get attached to. But you can integrate between Jira and the features, so you would have visibility to those things. I just don't know that you can directly control it to Cloud ALM from Jira. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so currently you can definitely utilize Cloud ALM feature to manage transports, and also you could automatically push that information to Jira. However, you can't control transports externally, meaning from Jira or Azure DevOps or any third-party tools at this time. That will come in the future, but today it's not available yet for you to be able to manage the items that are inside that feature. So our recommendation would be to use Cloud ALM to for example, to create, to manage, to import transports directly in Cloud ALM because you don't have an option at this time.
Yeah, and we were just on before this webinar, we were just on a call, as we're a partner, of course, of SAP, so we were on their advisory council, and so we do see the roadmap. It is coming soon. It looks like this year that those APIs will be extended, and we can enrich our product to include control and creation of features directly from Jira or Azure DevOps to help with management of transports. For those people that want something sooner than that, we do have other options. Like I mentioned, the direct management of transports from Jira is possible, as well as ADO and ServiceNow. Those could be used in conjunction with the Cloud ALM integration. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds if that's what you want, or you can, if you're not time sensitive, you can wait till the feature's available, and as soon as SAP provides that, it will be included in our product. Next question is the solution documentation configuration available in Cloud ALM? How would you answer that?
So you can document documentation directly in Cloud ALM, or you could have integration, for example, to an SAP repository or links to like a SharePoint if you're using SharePoint. But yes, there is documentation that you could have directly within Cloud ALM.
Okay, perfect. Baljan, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you all for actively participating in today's call. Hopefully we got to your questions. I'm not sure I covered everything, but if I did miss anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. There's a few ways to do that. First, you can go to our website, which is CoreALM.com. From there, you can click on the Talk to an Expert button. It's in your top right-hand corner of your screen. There's a form there. Just fill that out, and it'll come to us, and we'll get back to you right away, and we can answer any questions that you have. Our advice, I guess, as you're getting into use of Cloud ALM, the easiest way to get started is just pick a small project. Of course, you can always do something bigger if you want to do more of a migration. We covered that in our article in the SAP ALM Navigators. That's on LinkedIn, as well as on our website and the blog section. On LinkedIn, you can go to SAP ALM Navigator, which is under the newsletters for CoreALM's page, and you can subscribe to that for future topics if you're interested in that. But recommend picking a small project and just try to get started on that. We can always get you started with a free trial for the integration. That could be done on our environment, so you have absolutely no setup required. If you're interested, we can actually give you your own instance access, and you can try it there. Again, thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. If you're watching the recording, thanks for getting all the way to the end. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and yeah, happy Cloud ALM.